Ring around the rosy.
So I work for a rather large and well-known company in a relatively small town. I am not particularly fond of the job, but it pays well enough, and the only catch is that I work the night shift. Over the years I have made something of a name for myself there, and consequently, I only have one night a week in which I am not there working. I am 20-something, and regrettably, I still live at home with my parents and my two younger brothers. However, working these night shifts, I don't see any of them. I wake up at night after they have all already checked out for the night, and they are all gone by the time I arrive home in the mornings. Regardless, that is the situation I face day to day for years, until one week it all changed. My typical workday consisted of 4 hours of labor followed by an hour of lunch, which I generally took at home, seeing as I lived only a mile away. When I would arrive home, it would be around 2 to 3 in the morning, still pitch black out and not a noise to be heard. Knowing how light my family slept, I would never turn the lights on. Rather, I would use the flashlight on my iPhone and tiptoe about the kitchen as I prepared my meal. One night, I arrived home as usual and was sitting down at the table scrolling through my newsfeed casually while eating, when a sudden and shrill noise came from my garage. It scared me, but I knew if the noise kept going, my parents would surely wake up, and I would rather face whatever was in the garage than them. I approached the door and cracked it open. The light was on. I hadn't turned on any light, so this shocked me. I slipped through the door and closed it behind me so as not to further give cause to awaken my family. The deafening noise was coming from the far corner of the garage just behind my mom's Suburban parked there. I cautiously but quickly approached the source and discovered it to be nothing more than our air compressor. I yanked the plug out of the wall and the house fell quiet. I hadn't woken anyone up. What unsettled me was that someone had come into my garage and plugged in the air compressor that we always leave unplugged, and so the light was on. I left immediately back to work, trying throughout the next few hours not to think about it. I didn't see any of my family in that time either, so I never told any of them about it or asked any of them. I wish I had just thought to ask one of them, just thought to walk into one of their rooms and talk for a minute. A single minute could have probably changed everything, but I was selfish and held on to my hate for my family. The air compressor event happened on Tuesday morning, and now it was Sunday night, my night off. I was pretty antisocial and therefore had made no plans for the night other than maybe a movie and gaming. Now I, being a 23-year-old male, you can imagine that the smell in my room isn't of the highest quality. That being said, I remember sitting in my room around 11:30 at night and a nasty smell was coming. It was repulsive yet raised no flags other than the thought that I should do laundry the next morning when my family was gone. The rest of the night was uneventful after I retrieved a can of spray from my closet to repel the odor. The night was deadly silent. 8 in the morning arrived and I decided that it was time for laundry as the family would all be gone for the day by now. I gathered up all the dirty stuff and headed upstairs. The smell of last night was everywhere in the house. This got my attention. I thought perhaps the family cat had killed and brought a mouse over or something, but regardless, I needed to find out what the smell was. It thickened the air and burned my nostrils. I decided to investigate after starting my first load of laundry. As I was putting my heap of clothes into the machine, our house phone began ringing. I never answer this phone and therefore let it ring out. It went to voicemail, and when it did, a chills ran down my spine. The voicemail said, "Hi, this is the Cook family doctor. The Cooks are all sick at the moment with some nasty food poisoning and will be out for the next week or so. But feel free to leave a message and I will convey it to them as soon as possible. Thank you, and expect them back at work and school next week." Now this was perfectly normal. People get sick all the time. My family was no exception. The only problem was that we didn't have a family doctor. I dropped my basket of clothes and ran to my parents' room. Upon entering, I discovered the source of the smell. It was my parents. Dead on their bed, and days-old blood dried everywhere as if the killer had thrown his knife about in joy. Their eyes were open, flies were roaming around them, and I began to lose consciousness. I passed out. I awoke to the sound of people, a lot of people moving here and there. As I opened my eyes and tried to get my bearings, I noticed I was in my front yard. In the middle of the day, ambulances and police cars ran up the road. When someone noticed I was awake, they shouted and I was soon surrounded by 5 or 6 policemen and a few other medical personnel. I sat up and realized my hands were cuffed behind me. I remembered what I had seen, what had happened. How could they possibly think I did that to my parents? What about my brothers? I couldn't see them anywhere due to the blockade of bodies standing over me. A policeman crouched down and asked me to explain myself carefully. I told him everything I knew and, to my surprise, he breathed a sigh of relief. He explained that he never suspected me, but that he had to be sure. They had found no evidence that it was me who had killed them. I asked to see my brother, and his face of relief was immediately grim again. They were killed too. Over the next month, I slowly pieced together what had happened. The night of the air compressor was when they had been killed. The killer would have known someone was home, so he distracted me by turning on the air compressor and ran through the front door. My natural avoidance of my family let their corpses rot in their beds for almost a week before I noticed. The police have told me that there were at least 2 who were smart enough to leave that voicemail message on our phone to give my parents' employers and my brother's schools a reason not to worry for a while, but it was only a matter of time before someone other than me noticed their absence. A neighbor and friend of my mother's was on her way over while I was passed out to check up on her and upon arrival smelled the rot. She called the police and they were there within minutes. I can't go back to that house. I hold myself partially responsible for ignoring so many things that clued me into what was happening. What is worse is that night I was home for lunch, with my back to the hallway where they all slept. The killers heard me, saw me, decided not to kill me, and quietly slipped away. I still regret that my avoidance from my family members took this dark turn. So about 5 years ago, I left my home country and came to Canada to study for a master's in business administration. However, due to high tuition fees and cost of living, I had no choice but to take up a part-time job. I looked at various types of available jobs that would fit my interests. Looking back, I don't know why I was so picky about it. It was not that I would be stuck in the same type of job once I got my degree. So there I was the day after Christmas thinking about what part-time job I would be doing. Being a food delivery guy sounded nice if the food I was given to deliver would not be engulfed by me before I even reached the delivery location. After going over many more options, I finally made my decision. Night shift at a convenience store it was. The store where I was to work was on the outskirts of the city of Toronto, a peaceful location I thought when I first arrived there. A classmate of mine had worked prior there. I asked him why he left the job, but there was a sudden change of expression on his face. It's been a long since that incident, so I don't remember whether he told me the reason or not. Anyway, the first day of work was fun. I made 2 new friends there. One was this funny Filipino kid named Noel who was also like me an international student studying for a business degree. The other was the girl my perverted batchmate had mentioned. Her name was Sarah, and she was the nicest person I had met. From the moment I entered the store, she helped me familiarize myself with all the do's and don'ts of work, from the crucial ones to the minute details. It was fun talking with them and I felt lucky to have such great coworkers. So as usual, I had a night shift on Friday. I entered the store at 10 o'clock in the night. I was supposed to handle the store alone that day. The guy who worked the day shift left the store 15 minutes later. And so begins my first night shift alone. At night I was told that I could expect about 10 to 20 people, usually to buy beer or a pack of cigarettes. However, the first person who walked in surprised me. It was Sarah. She also came to the duty because the boss had told her to accompany me since it was my second day at the job and boss was not sure if I could handle the store alone. I was happy to see her. An hour passed and we talked about a lot of things, from our plans after graduation to my life back in my home country. She also found it funny that I wore so many layers of clothing, to which I explained I had never seen snowfall until I moved here, so this amount of cold was a bit too difficult for me to adjust. A couple of customers came and went, and at midnight I went out for some fresh air and a smoke. A man suddenly walked in as I left. I didn't see him properly as I thought he was just some other midnight customer. However, I did see a strange tattoo on his wrist. After about 10 minutes I went back in to see Sarah, terrified, shaking in fear. I asked her what happened. According to her, the man who had just entered the store walked to the counter. He seemed to be mumbling things to himself and often made strange yelling noises. She thought the man might have a mental disability and at first felt some sympathy for him, but she also felt a bit scared, which is natural for a woman who was alone in a store facing someone who can act potentially aggressive. She timidly asked if she could help him with anything, to which he didn't reply but simply stared at her with an unfriendly gaze. After about a few minutes of him staring at her, she tried to find a way to get him out. She handed him a few packets of chewing gum from the counter and told him he could take those and leave. She also began to look for some number to call someone who could help, but after that, the man left on his own. I thought it was probably some guy high on some drugs wandering through this place at night. I tried to reassure her and even made some jokes about it. She faked a faint smile, but I could tell that she was quite terrified after that strange encounter. About half an hour after that incident, I had to go to the washroom. Sarah asked me where I was going and I told her that I was going to the bathroom, and I joked about the man returning to the store. Again she faked a smile. I guess at that time I felt it was a good time to act a bit tough to impress her somewhat. I told her, "Just call me if something happens." She replied, smiling once more. It seemed she recovered from that incident and was joking around once again. I went towards the washroom. As I was doing my job, I suddenly heard a loud voice from outside. "Is anyone there?" I asked, but nobody responded. I quickly washed my hands and ran towards the counter. I could sense that something terrible had happened. The small distance from the washroom to the counter seemed to take hours. I reached the counter and suddenly saw the flashing of the red and blue police lights. In front of me stood a police officer who looked at me with a suspicious glance, but there was no trace of Sarah. Before I could speak, the police officer asked me if I worked here. I said yes, and he again asked me if I was working alone or not. I said no, and the police suddenly paused for a moment. With each passing second, I felt more and more anxious. I wanted to know what was going on. The police officer then asked me to identify a body. A chill ran down my spine as I heard that. Nothing was making sense to me at that moment. There was a police car, and at a little distance was an ambulance. Around us were nothing but tall trees. As I reached closer and closer to the ambulance, I felt a terrible sense of dread. 2 policemen brought down a body covered in a white sheet with patches of blood. The policeman told me to have a look and say if I recognize her. One of the policemen uncovered the sheets, revealing the corpse, and it was Sarah. She had been stabbed without mercy. But when did this happen? I was only gone for a few minutes, and why didn't she make any noise? All these questions were going through my head. I told the police officer who she was, and they asked me why she had come this far from the store if she was on duty with me. I told the officer that I had seen her minutes ago before I went to the washroom, and I had no idea why she had come this far from the shop. There was visible confusion among all the policemen present at the scene. The officer asked me when was the last time I saw her. I again said I had seen her before going to the washroom last time. The other 2 policemen began to mumble something to each other. They warned me to tell the truth. They told me that the post-mortem report would disclose everything, and it would be better for me to tell everything now. Of course, they were suspecting me. I asked them at what time they discovered the body. They told me that they got a call 40 minutes ago. At that point I couldn't make any sense of what was going on. I was talking to her about 10 or 12 minutes ago before I went to the washroom, and after that, I was brought there by the police. This couldn't be true. If she was dead for 40 minutes, then who was I talking with just then? I told the police officer that a guy with a tattoo had come about an hour ago in the shop, and I gave his description to them. The policeman, not satisfied with my answers, took me to the police station for a statement. There I repeated the same thing. The investigation went on for a long while. They didn't find any evidence against me or anyone else for that matter. Following the incident, security cameras were installed near the store where I worked. No one ever found who murdered Sarah on that Friday night. Following my graduation, I got a job at a multinational firm in Tokyo where I currently work. The salary is good, and the work, even though hectic, is not all that bad. I have moved on from that incident, but I still talk to Noel. We are close friends. Noel stayed in Canada after getting his degree and is now married. It has been 5 years since that incident, and who killed Sarah is still unknown, and the fact that I talked to Sarah after she died, it still makes me feel uneasy. Police also haven't caught that tattoo guy yet. I have thought a lot, and in my opinion, the tattoo guy who walked in the store when I was outside must have killed Sarah, because other than that guy I don't have anyone to suspect. Back when I was about 18 or 19, I used to work in a coffee shop at a gas station. It was just a gas station, not one of those big all-in-one. I've had several night shift jobs over the years. I'm pretty much a night person and I'm always up late, so it just seems to make sense. Anyway, this night was cold and rainy. I had a regular customer in the store, Jim, a fellow night shifter, just getting some coffee and having a chat before going off to work. He put down the money for his coffee, told me to keep the change, and ran out into the rain. I turned towards the security monitor and watched Jim run across the lot to his truck underneath the roof at the gas pumps. I laughed to myself in my warm, dry, and cozy little den as he got in his truck, started it, and pulled off into the night. As the truck pulled away, it revealed a man that must have been hidden behind it. He was just standing there, under the roof of the gas pumps, facing in the direction of the camera. Jim's truck came back onto the camera in the background as he turned around and pulled out onto the road, leaving me behind with the strange man. The man stood there for a long while, looking up at the camera, at me. I couldn't make out any features, as he was towards the far end of the pumps. It was unnerving just watching him there, standing still and not moving. After a while, I decided that he was just trying to get out of the rain, and while I still found it odd, I turned my attention back to the book that I had been reading. Probably about 20 minutes had passed, and I had nearly forgotten about the man when a loud crack of thunder snapped me out of my book. I sighed, trying to calm myself, but then I turned towards the monitor, and my heart rate picked right back up. The man was still out there, only now he was much closer, standing in the rain. I could now tell that he was looking directly at the camera, almost as if he could see me watching him. He had on a black jacket and jeans and held something in his right hand. My throat began to swell up like it does often in moments of intense fear. I didn't like that at all. I had to lock the door, even though the man hadn't done anything overtly threatening. It was clear that something was wrong with him. Nobody normally stands in a thunderstorm, glaring intently at a gas station security camera with a creepy look on their face and holding something in their hand. I locked the door of the cafe, and as I came back up to the register area, I looked at the monitor and he was still there, in the same spot, looking directly at me. Only now he had his right hand out in front of him and I could see the knife he had clutched in it. It was like he knew I had now seen the knife and was mocking me. Never have I felt such terror, such a sense that I was about to die. This man knew I was in there. I watched him standing like that, and a few minutes later he started walking towards the cafe. I grabbed my book bag and ran towards the office door. I made sure the door was locked, tossed my bag on the desk, and sat down to call 911. On my right there were more security monitors. These had various angles, including the interior, so the manager could watch the employees. The man was nowhere to be seen on any of the screens. The 911 operator answered, and I bumbled my words trying hurriedly to explain the situation. Eventually, I got her to understand that there was a knife-wielding maniac somewhere on the property. She told me to remain calm and that police were on their way. She said she would stay on the line with me, as she could tell I was terrified, and that really would have been nice. However, only seconds after she said it, there was a loud bang of thunder, and in the blink of an eye, all the light was stolen from the room and the power died. I waited for the operator to say something, afraid to speak myself and see if she was still there, but she wasn't. Slowly, I slid under the desk, pulling my bag under with me. A few minutes passed and now I could hear the footsteps inside the cafe. I was sure I locked the main doors of the cafe, but how did he break in? Maybe it's a cop, I confronted myself with and waited for them to call me. Suddenly, the lights came back on. The monitors were now on, and on the TV, I could see that man standing outside the office door. Now I was sure that I was going to die. I don't know if I had locked the cafe doors properly or not because I was panicking at that time. If I had locked it, he couldn't have come in easily. Now he was just one door away from me. He was holding the knife and started kicking on the door. There was nothing I could do, so I closed my eyes and began to cry. Suddenly the kicking stopped. I opened my eyes and I could see the police handcuffing the guy in the monitor. I stopped crying and opened the door. Police asked if I was okay, and they were also relieved because they were just in time. I saw his face, and sure enough, I will never forget that sinister face in my life. Police said that he was high on drugs and could have done anything to me. I called my manager and went to my home to get some rest. The next day, I quit that job and now I'm currently working the night shift at a different place, but there is nothing to worry about because I have got 2 fellow night shifters working with me. This incident is the scariest incident of my life, and thinking about it just gives me goosebumps about how close I was to the death.